heart racing as she clutched the suitcase in her hand. She dialed James' number, but the call went unanswered. Wayne groaned when a deep voice from behind made her flinch. Going somewhere? Her breath hissed, hearing his deep voice. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned around with wide eyes. 𝐻𝐚's presence was a mix of danger and allure that sent chills down her spine. 𝐻𝐚, she stammered, stepping backwards, while the suitcase from her hand fell. 𝐻𝐚's eyes glimmered with a mix of amusement and menace. You think you can escape me? He moved closer to her and grabbed her hair, pulling her face closer to his, while his left hand sneaked around her waist. Wayne gasped as tears rolled down her eyes. I can't breathe with you. Why don't you understand? She whispered, her voice trembling. 𝐻𝐚 chuckled darkly and brought his left hand to touch her face. Your fear only makes me want you more. He traced his thumb over her jawline. Let me go, I'm engaged to someone else. 𝐻𝐚's expressions darkened. You belong to me, no one else, he said in dangerously dark tone. You don't own me. I'm getting married to James. A dangerous gleam flashed in his eyes and he leaned in. Wayne stood still, scared their lips might touch if she moved. James, do you think he can protect you from me? One word from me and he's dead, he said in a low growl. Wayne's breath caught in her throat as terror flooded through her senses. Don't hurt him, please. 𝐻𝐚 smirked. I have held him and your family hostage. Her eyes widened in surprise. Did you really think you would flee away with him and I wouldn't know it? What? Leave them, please. Then do as I say, he demanded. Marry me, be mine, and no harm would come to your family or James. She bit her lips. My one word and they will be wiped out. I'll marry you, she whispered with a shaky nod and lowered her head. Good girl. He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Now you'll see that being with me is the safest place you can be. His eyes lingered on her lips. Holding back an urge to capture her lips, he leaned towards her neck. Wayne shut her eyes tightly, knowing she was stepping into the world of darkness. Few days later, Wayne stood in front of the large window, staring at the sky blankly. She ran her fingers absent-mindedly over the curtain, her mind playing the events of the past of their marriage. She felt 𝐻𝐚's grip on her life tightening with each passing day. A shiver ran down her spine as the door creaked open. Wayne didn't move around, knowing well who it was. 𝐻𝐚 approached her. My queen. His voice was soft, almost tender, but she didn't want to be fooled by him. What are you thinking? He wrapped his arms around her waist and buried his face in the crook of her neck. Wayne's breath caught in her throat. His touch sent chills down her spine and she couldn't suppress the shudder. His actions always scared her, forcing her to think otherwise. Nothing, just how different everything is now. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. You belong to me now. Everything has changed indeed. She pressed her lips together, feeling a knot in her stomach as he trailed soft kisses from her neck to shoulder. 𝐻𝐚, I need some air. I need to leave this house, this room, just for a little while. 𝐻𝐚's grasp around her tightened. He pulled out and turned her to face him. You want to leave? He grabbed her jaw, his voice dangerously low and dark. Just for a walk, please. I can't breathe in here, it's suffocating, she said through teary eyes. 𝐻𝐚's eyes softened for a while, but then a sinister smile curved into his lips. All right, but you'll have to go with the guards. You won't take a step without them. The relief she felt was quickly overshadowed by fear. 𝐻𝐚, please, he cut in. Don't argue with me. You're mine and I will not have you running away again. Do you understand? She quickly nodded, scaring he might change his decision. I understand, he hummed, rubbing his thumb over her lips. He leaned in a state of trance. Wayne's breath went uneven, his lips touched her chin. I'll freshen up, he said, moving back and kissing her forehead. Time skip. Wayne feels at ease as she goes for a walk whenever she wants. She even goes to buy groceries. 𝐻𝐚 doesn't stop her. He even wanted to go for a walk with her once, but Wayne's hesitation and disdain didn't go unnoticed by him. When 𝐻𝐚 was sure that Wayne wouldn't try to run away from him, he ordered the guards to wait for her at a certain spot. All this while, she met a guy named Damien and secretly made friends with him. These days, 𝐻𝐚 was frustrated as his enemy had been keeping an eye on him and attacked him several times. He just doesn't want 𝐻𝐚 to get hurt. He forbade her to meet her parents and Damien. He wanted her to stay away from Damien. 𝐻𝐚 argued with him, causing him to yell at her. 𝐻𝐚 was overwhelmed. She was bottling up her emotions. Today, after many days, she came to the park and met Damien. She told him about how 𝐻𝐚 married her. He seems quite a scary guy. Are you sure you're safe with him? He said worriedly. He is scary indeed. I don't know, but his obsession scares me. She mumbled. I don't understand how he learned about you. As you said, he's a mafia, so it's not a big deal for him to know about me. 𝐻𝐚 nodded, lowering her head. But I don't know when will this all end. Her voice broke. He told me not to meet you or my parents. I miss them so much. Tears rolled down her eyes as she cried. Damien moved closer to her and embraced her, taking her off guard. I'm fine, she said, realizing 𝐻𝐚's embrace and touch were warmer. It made her feel safe. 𝐻𝐚 quickly shrugged her thoughts. Damien, she tried to break free. Damien held her shoulders and smiled. 𝐻𝐚, I promise I'll protect you. 𝐻𝐚 could do nothing to us. Will you be with me and leave 𝐻𝐚? 𝐻𝐚 was speechless at his sudden confession. Damien's gaze landed on 𝐻𝐚 striding towards them, and he smirked. What do you think you are doing? He growled, pulling away 𝐻𝐚, who was startled by his sudden appearance out of nowhere. Nothing, she was crying, so 𝐻𝐚 grabbed him by the collar, cutting him off. Shut up. If I saw you near her again, I'll kill you, I promise. He held 𝐻𝐚 by the wrist and dragged her. 𝐻𝐚 was too stunned to speak. Her heart sank, seeing the veins in his forehead and neck pop out of anger. 𝐻𝐚 drove home without uttering a word, and 𝐻𝐚 knew this was the calm before the storm. She entered the room with a racing heart. Why did you meet him? His tone was dangerously calm. He roared, making her flinch. Didn't I tell you not to meet him? He grabbed her by the arm. 𝐻𝐚 trembled. Why were you crying in his arms? She barely shook her head. He hugged me out of the blue. Shut up. If you didn't meet him, he wouldn't have hugged you. He grabbed her jaw and tried to break free. He's my friend. What's the big deal if I met him? You can't control my life, she yelled at him. Have you forgotten you belong to me? Or have you fallen for him just after a few meetings? He released her with a jerk. He wasn't in his senses. You don't own me. What can you do, even if I have fallen for? 𝐻𝐚 smashed his lips on hers, cutting her off. He kissed her hungrily. 𝐻𝐚 wiggled in his grip. You need to learn who you belong to, he said, his voice terrifying whisper, and pushed her on the bed, hovering over her. 𝐻𝐚's breath caught in throat, realizing his intentions as he leaned over her neck, sucking and kissing like a madman. 𝐻𝐚, don't do this, she cried, struggling against him as he had her hands pinned over her head. Her cries seemed to fall deaf on his ears. Desperation and fear overwhelmed her as he moved further down. 𝐻𝐚, stop, please. She screamed, something in her voice pierced through his anger. He froze, his eyes wide with sudden realization. He looked down at her, seeing the terror and tears in her eyes. It was like a splash of cold water. He recoiled, his expression shifting from rage to horror. Oh my God, he whispered, stumbling back. What have I done? 𝐻𝐚 curled into a ball, sobbing uncontrollably. 𝐻𝐚 fell to his knees beside her. 𝐻𝐚, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. She didn't respond, her sobs only sound in the room. I just lost control. I couldn't bear it. He wanted to snatch you from me. 𝐻𝐚's heart shattered as he realized the extent of his actions. Forgive me, please. I was wrong. I swear I won't do this ever again. I just love you so much. I'm sorry. 𝐻𝐚 looked at him, her eyes filled with fear. This is not how love is. Don't name it love. You're just obsessed with me. You can win my body, but not my love, heart and soul. For a moment she thought, as if tears glistened in his eyes. Her words pierced through his chest as he realized what she said was true. He stood and dragged his feet out of the room. Few days later. Since that day, 𝐻𝐚 has been quiet all the time. She doesn't even go for a walk. 𝐻𝐚 falls into the depths of remorse, seeing her this way. He can't look into her eyes. His voice is filled with remorse each time he interacts with her. He barely goes near her as he doesn't want her to feel uncomfortable. These days, Tim is busy with his work and arrives home late at night. Now Wine walked into the kitchen as she had cravings for a pasta. She took out all the ingredients and turned on the stove without noticing the oil all over the stove. The faint flicker of the flame ignited in the air. Suddenly, a deafening burst echoed through the kitchen as the oil-slicked stove erupted into a fiery blaze. Wine screamed and raised her hands in front of her face out of fear, stumbling back. The searing fire leaped at her skin, causing a sharp pain to shoot through her palms to her arms. The burning sensation intensified as she felt her skin singe and blistered from the intense heat. A sudden rush of water scattered from the ceiling. Wine arrived earlier than usual as he felt a sense of uneasiness in his heart. He burst into the kitchen and his heart sank at the sight of her. He swiftly held her. "Are you okay?" She stared at him absent-mindedly, her heart raced. "Samuel, call the doctor," he yelled as soon as his assistant entered. Ken scooped her in his arms and walked to their shared bedroom. He gently sat her on the bed as tears streamed down her face. "Does it hurt badly?" he asked anxiously. "It hurts so much," she whispered, her voice broke. Ken's eyes filled with anguish as he looked at her injuries. He grabbed a clean towel. "I'm sorry," he gently patted her arms dry, careful not to cause any more pain. She winced as he tended to her burns, her tears mixing with the water dripping from her hair. "It's not your fault. The water sprinkler had a problem. It didn't work in the meantime," she managed to say through gritted teeth. Ken's face was etched with frustration and guilt. "I promised to protect you and I failed." Samuel knocked on the door and entered. "Sir, the doctor is here. Send her in." The doctor entered while Samuel called Ken over. "What's it?" he asked, not taking his eyes off Wine. "Sir, this was an accident. Someone did it intentionally." Ken's gaze darkened as he looked at Samuel. "I just observed and the stove area is oily." Ken ran his fingers through his hair and pursed his lips. "Damn you," he muttered, letting out a sigh. "Go and check the water sprinkler system as well." He then walked to the bed as the doctor was applying a proper burn dressing to prevent infection and promote healing. Wine bit her lip, trying to stay strong despite the pain. "You're doing great." He caressed her hair softly and whispered. The doctor continued her work, applying cooling gel to the burns after covering them in a sterile dressing. She prescribed some pain medication and antibiotics to prevent infection. "Make sure she takes the medication as prescribed. Keep the dressing clean and dry." Ken nodded. "I will." The doctor left, saying she would check on her in a couple of days. Samuel escorted her out while Ken sat in front of Wine. "Why did you go to the kitchen?" he asked, wiping her face gently. "I wanted to cook some pasta," she mumbled, sniffing. Ken hummed in response. "You're soaked. I'll send the maid to help you change," he said and stood to take out clothes for her. After some time, he came back and kept the clothes on the bed. "The maid is in her quarter," she spoke as Ken was about to walk out. "I'll call her here," he said and walked out. After some time, the maid came in and helped her change. Ken also changed in another room and came back. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. Seeing him coming towards her with a dry, he shook his head. "I want to. Just relax." He began drying her hair, his movements slow and careful, as if he was afraid of causing her any more pain. Wine closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his touch as his fingers glittered gently in her hair. As he finished, Ken set the dryer aside and walked out. After 15 minutes, he came back with a tray in his hands. "I ordered some pasta for you. I hope you like it." He placed the tray in front of her. The rich aroma filled the room, making Wine's stomach growl. Her eyes filled with delight, but soon it was replaced by gloom. "I can't eat it," she said, glancing at her hands gloomily. "It's okay, I can feed you." He picked up a fork and filled some pasta around it, holding it out to her. She opened her mouth, letting him feed her first bite. "It's good," she said, swallowing it. Then smiled faintly, his eyes softened as he watched her. "I'm glad you liked it." He continued feeding her. I felt a strange sense of closeness to him. "Wouldn't you eat?" she asked hesitantly. He shook his head. "I'll eat later." "Thank you." She spoke after a few bites and looked at him. He reached out, brushing a hair strand from her face, his touch gentle and lingering. "Don't thank me, just let me take care of you," he said, his voice almost whispered. Wine nodded in a state of trance. Then wiped her mouth and pressed a long kiss on her forehead. She felt the warmth spreading throughout her soul. Then picked up the tray and walked out. Time skipped. It's been more than 15 days. Wayne's bones are healing, and all thanks to Thames' unwavering attention and care. Every morning he would gently help her dress, making sure her bandages were secure. His careful eyes for details were amazing. He always knew what she needed before she even asked. He would feed her with patience and tenderness, always attentive to her actions. He would even read her favorite books and keep her company. He tucks her in bed comfortably, staying with her until she falls asleep. One couldn't ignore the change in Thames' once intimidating demeanor, softening with the passing days, revealing a man capable of profound care and empathy. The dark, obsessive intensity that had given way to a nurturing side she hadn't thought possible. These days, Wayne has noticed that Thang is extremely stressed. When Thang arrived home in a vulnerable state, he had bruises all over his face. Wayne saw him going into another room without sparing her a glance. Samuel rushed in with a worried expression. "Where is sir?" "In that room. What happened to him?" she asked anxiously. Samuel let out a sigh. He was attacked by his worst enemy, Damien, his sir's brother. Wayne's eyes widened with surprise. Samuel began speaking. "Damien, let's sit and talk." Damien chuckled darkly. "There's nothing to talk about. What do you want? Why did you become like this? We are brothers," he said in a low tone. "What do I want?" He moved closer to him with a smirk. "I want your death, your destruction. I became like this just because of you. We are not brothers but enemies, remember?" He pursed his lips. "Wayne has nothing to do with all this. She is innocent. Why did you try to harm her?" "She is innocent, so was I. I was sentenced to prison. Can you imagine how is life in prison? It's a living hell." He poked Thames' chest. "You're crazy for Wayne. Her hands were just burnt and you are going nuts. I'll kill her and seal her." Thames punched him in the jaw. "Wayne has nothing to do with it. Don't drag her," he growled. Damien chuckled. "I have dragged her in it. I approached her deliberately to hurt you. I'll snatch each of your beloved people. I'll kill them just like I killed Mom and Dad." Thames stared at him with disbelief. "What did you say?" He grabbed Damien by the collar. "I killed Mom and Dad. I burned them alive." He emphasized each word. "How can you become such a monster?" Then threw several blows at him. Damien composed himself and hit him back. "You all made me that." He kicked him, making him fall, and sat on top of him. "Dad gave you everything." He threw a blow at his face. "What about me?" He threw another blow at Thames' face. "I went to the prison wrongly." He threw a blow again. "You became the mafia king. What about me?" He was constantly punching him in the face. "I killed each of them for you. They accused you wrongly, we all know." Then pushed him and sat on top of him. "I didn't want you to enter this dark world and lose your innocence. I helped you out of the prison. I couldn't do anything more." Then threw a punch in his face. "How could you kill Mom and Dad?" He yelled at him, holding his collar, his voice laced with agony. Thames' vision blurred with tears. The little boy he had once protected and cherished became a monster. Damien pushed him and stood with a sinister smile. "You killed them in cold blood." "I did, and now I'll kill Wayne. But I won't give her an easy death. I'll torture her brutally in front of you and burn her alive." Thames pulled out his gun. "You're no longer the Damien I knew. You're a stranger, a nightmare." Thames' voice broke his heart, racked with unbearable pain as he pointed his gun at Damien and shot him thrice. Wayne gasped as Samuel completed. "Sir is not fine." She bit her lips and flinched, hearing a loud smashing noise coming from the room. Soon after, Thames' screams were heard as if he was throwing things and hitting something. Samuel and Wayne exchanged glances. "I'll see," she whispered and strode towards the room. "Thames," she called out, knocking on the door, but the noise never stopped. "Thames, please open the door." She banged on the door, but he didn't respond. She swiftly went, and after a few minutes she came back with an extra key and unlocked the door. Her heart ached seeing 𝐻𝐤 hitting on the dressing mirror constantly. His hand was bleeding. 𝐻𝐤, she whispered, closing the door and entered. 𝐻𝐤 picked up the showcase and turned around to throw it on the floor but stopped seeing �W𝐚. �W𝐚 felt a rush of agony seeing his tears. He threw the showcase beside him and turned his back on her. Leave �W𝐚, he barely whispered, closing his eyes. �W𝐚 pursed her lips and moved closer to him. Your hand is bleeding, she muttered, holding his wrist gently. He turned to her and tried hard to blink away his tears. No need to hold back. As soon as the tears flowed down his face, he slumped on the floor and sat in front of him. I killed him, he whispered, his voice laced with agony. I killed my brother. �W𝐚 couldn't hold back her tears anymore, seeing his vulnerable state. She pulled him into a hug. 𝐻𝐤 buried his face in her chest. She had no words to console him, knowing nothing could lessen his sorrow. Let's go to our room, she said after some time. He pulled out and nodded with a lowered head. They stood and walked to their shared bedroom. �W𝐚 cleaned his wounds and bandaged them. 𝐻𝐤 changed and laid on the bed quietly. �W𝐚 also laid their backs facing each other. She turned around, staring at his back, and called him out. 𝐻𝐤. He turned to face her. You haven't taken painkillers, she said. He held her hand and pulled her back. No need, it wouldn't lessen the pain here. He pointed at his heart and pursed her lips and laid back. Scars are fading, he mumbled and kissed her palm. She nodded, scooting closer to him. Don't think much, just sleep, she said, tracing her thumb over the corner of his lips, which was bruised. Can I hold you? He whispered. She looked at him and nodded. 𝐻𝐤 encircled his arms around her torso and buried his face in her neck. �W𝐚 closed her eyes, feeling his warmth. Few days later. In the days following Damien's death, 𝐻𝐤 was a man broken by grief. The betrayal and loss of his younger brother left a deep scar on his soul. Despite his sorrow, 𝐻𝐤 never wavered in his care for �W𝐚, which only made her fall for him harder. 𝐻𝐤 takes her on dates, leaves her in her parents' house, and goes for shopping. He tries his best to make her happy. Now they came for a walk after having dinner in the restaurant. I'll get us some ice cream. You wait here. She smiled and said, seeing the ice cream stand. I'll bring it, he said, not letting off her hand. Let me bring it, please. She whined with a pout. 𝐻𝐤 smiled and flicked her forehead lightly. Okay, go, he said, letting go of her hand and watched her go. Excuse me, handsome. 𝐻𝐤 turned around with a frown as a young girl approached him. I'm Sarah. Can we go and talk in private? She was about to touch him, but 𝐻𝐤 stepped backward. Stay away. �W𝐚's chest tightened with jealousy, and she felt a surge of possessiveness rise within her. She stood towards them. Why, I'll make you happy, I promise, she said with a meaningful smile. 𝐻𝐤 rubbed his temples, trying hard not to lash out on her. 𝐻𝐤, I got your favorite ice cream. �W𝐚 slipped her arm around his waist and handed him the ice cream with a smile. Sarah's smile faded as she stared at her with a frown. 𝐻𝐤 surprisingly held the ice cream, wrapping his arm around her shoulder and pulled her closer. And who are you? She asked with raised brows, leaning her head against 𝐻𝐤's shoulder. I didn't realize you were with someone, she said and walked away. 𝐻𝐤 smiled, kissing �W𝐚's temple. Why were you smiling at her? She glared at him. I didn't, I swear. He shook his head. Don't even dare to. Don't worry, I'll just smile at you, my queen. She nodded. Good. Did she say something else? He shook his head. Just tried to hit on me and touch me. She cursed her inaudibly. I'll not spare her. 𝐻𝐤 held her as she was about to go after Sarah. Calm down, why so furious? She didn't touch me. I learned it from you. Blame yourself. He shrugged her shoulders and tiptoed, aching his lips, taking him by surprise. Aren't you too bold today? He mumbled with surprise. �W𝐚 smiled and crashed her lips on his. 𝐻𝐤's eyes widened before he could kiss her back. �W𝐚 pulled out. Bold enough, I guess. That was not fair. He held her by the waist and pulled her closer. �W𝐚 took the bite of her ice cream and shrugged her shoulders. I don't like vanilla flavor. He stared at his ice cream. I forgot to ask. Anyways, eat it. It has melted already. Give me yours. She shook her head. Tia was about to snatch it from her, but Wine ran away giggling. Tia ran after her. Their laughs filled the air. After some time they sat while the ice cream had melted. She placed her head on his shoulder and let out a sigh. Tired? He asked softly, stroking her hair. She nodded, rubbing her nose on his knee. Wine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I know my actions were harsh, but I just love you so much. I couldn't leave you. She stared at him for a while and said, I love you too, Thank. He froze and looked down at her. Really? She nodded and kissed him on the lips. Thank pulled her onto his lap, deepening the kiss.